Today from the Global Lane, temporary Gaza truce. Will the rocket attacks resume after the Israeli election? Washington awaits the release of the Mueller report. What's next? An investigation of the investigators? Doing time for the crime. A new federal law helps bring reform. But what about jobs and life change after prison? And religious liberty. It's not only for Christians. And it's all right here, right now, from the Global Lane. Tens of thousands of Palestinians rallied last weekend, marking the first anniversary of their Great March of Return protests. For a year now, the Israel-Gaza border has been the scene of regular protests and attempts by young Palestinians to break through the fence and attack innocent Israelis. The Gaza protests came after several days of Hamas rocket fire, which destroyed homes and injured Israelis in the Tel Aviv area. A temporary truce is now in effect between Hamas and the Israeli Defense Forces. So what now? Well, joining us is Foundation for Defensive Democracy's analyst, David May. David, thanks for joining us. And we see that this ceasefire truce negotiated by Egypt is now in effect. So how long do you expect it to last?
Thank you for having me. Right now, we've seen Hamas came out with a pretty big victory. They were able to press some of their demands, increase humanitarian access, and increase of Palestinians that can cross the border. So for them, it's been a big gain. But one big thing that we did see was their ability to manage these protests. For the past year, Israel has been complaining that Hamas is sending these civilians to try to rush the border. And we've seen over the past several weeks that they've been able to minimize, reduce, or cancel them. And so this has been very instructive as to Hamas's role in the larger protests.
It almost seems like it's the new intifada with these protests at the border. So they're getting their way in a way, aren't they?
Yeah. So with the Palestinians, they've had several different types of attacks, different methods of attacking Israel. They sent their rockets, then Israel built Iron Dome. They had they had terrorist attacks, so Israel built security barriers. Now they've sent waves of civilians at the border, so Israel has had to respond as such. And it's just every time they come up with a new threat, Israel is forced to come up with a new means of defending itself.
Well, world media often talks about Israel's violent response to protests at the Gaza border, but these are more than just protests. What have you discovered in your research?
Exactly. So there's been many different instances of using incendiary kites, different types of petrol bombs, and other means of trying to attack Israeli civilians and soldiers along the border. There was even one Israeli soldier who was killed by sniper fire. There have been many different instances of either firing from among civilian groups or firing from houses along the Gaza border. So there's been a lot of violence that has emerged from these so-called nonviolent protests.
Well, I even saw recently a video on social media of some 8-year-old boys that were sent across the border. They got through the fence and they had knives on them. They were going to kill Jews. And then some IDF soldiers were apparently helping the boys gave them some water or something, helped them get back into Gaza. Is that common to use children?
Unfortunately, yes. There's been many different cases of either sending minors or other categories of civilians who should not be used at the border. And this is definitely not the first time that young Palestinians have been sent to attack Israelis with knives or other types of materials to attack civilians.
And it's just not the Israelis who are critical of Hamas and its behavior. Residents of Gaza recently held protests of their own against price increases and corruption by the Hamas government. Many were beaten for protesting. Tell us about that.
So it's very rare in the Gaza Strip to see protests against Hamas. Hamas keeps the territory under a fairly tight grip. So it's pretty novel, pretty unique to see these protests against their rule. Some point to an indication that they're getting weaker, but I don't think that's the case. I think they're just as strong as they've been, especially when you see how they were able to manage the protests over the past week and minimize Palestinians from reaching the border. However, the Palestinians of Gaza are living under tough conditions, and Hamas is one of the main reasons for that.
What was behind the recent Hamas rocket launches against innocent Israelis in the Tel Aviv area? I know some people say it's just time to influence the election. What do you think?
When we're talking about within Gaza, there's several different militant groups, and not all of them see eye to eye. And even within Hamas, there's separate groups that don't always adhere to the strategy or to the directives of their main leadership. So Israel was willing, for the sake of keeping the peace, to accept the excuse that it was some type of weather malfunction that caused these rockets to be launched at Israeli civilians. But it's unclear what the exact cause was. Maybe it was a breakaway group. Maybe it was someone trying to destabilize the region before the Israeli elections.
They just can't keep going on with these rockets coming into neighborhoods in Tel Aviv. Do you think we'll see a ground war?
I don't think that there's an appetite for Israel to launch a ground war, particularly before the elections or going into elections, or then after there are the elections, then there will have to be a new government formed. I just don't see the appetite there, and the border has been relatively calm from from an Israeli perspective. Only a few rockets every few weeks is less than what they had been dealing with before 2014.
Finally, David, after the Israeli election, President Trump says he'll unveil his Middle East peace plan. Any idea what may be in it? I know there's been some talk about a new state solution, a separate Palestinian state comprised of Gaza and parts of the Sinai. What do you think? What's going to happen? What will be in it?
I think the key here is that nobody really knows, and that's one thing to praise the administration for. The Trump administration has expressed a willingness to think outside the box and take steps that had previously been seen as impossible or unfeasible, especially when we talk about the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, or recently as the Golan Heights announcement recognizing Israeli sovereignty there. So they've definitely been able and willing to go ahead of the curve on certain things and take positions that other administrations were not willing to take.
Okay, David May of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you, David, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
CBN presents The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
We're going to talk about some of the incredible promises God has made to His children.
In Pat Robertson's newest teaching, you'll discover the I Wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation, and see amazing stories of God's promises in action.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Break free from stress and despair.
The Lord doesn't want you to live in fear, but to know the rewards given to those who love God.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
With the Robert Mueller Russia investigation concluded, the focus now turns to Capitol Hill. Democrats are pledging to continue investigating President Trump, his taxes, business, personal finances, perhaps more than any past president. And former House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes is pledging to make criminal referrals to the Justice Department. President Trump is pledging to release more documents, especially regarding the DOJ's FISA warrants. What now? Where is all this heading? Here to sort some of this out is former federal prosecutor, legal analyst, and author Sidney Powell. Sidney, good to see you again. And before we get to FISA and criminal referrals, many people on Capitol Hill are calling for full disclosure of the Mueller report. What should Attorney General William Barr do?
Well, he's already just said that he will disclose as much of it as he can according to the law. The president wants full disclosure of it. Mr. Barr does, too, as long as it's legal to do so. And that's what he'll do. There's certain parts of it that simply can't be disclosed because grand jury material is precluded from being disclosed by law. And, of course, he can't disclose classified information or information related to ongoing investigations, and there are several. So some of it simply has to be protected. But he'll disclose absolutely everything he can, and I thought his letter was very well done.
Well, but it seems like Democrats are still in denial. Why is that?
Because they refuse to see the truth. They fabricated this entire fraud out of whole cloth, and it's their story. They're sticking to it.
Well, I'm sure we'll see House investigations of the president's taxes, personal business finances. It'll be coming from some of the same people who are convinced the president colluded with the Russians. I'm thinking Jerry Nadler, Maxine Waters, Adam Schiff. What's the risk to the Democrats by doing that?
Well, the Democrats have the donkey as their logo for a reason. They've been acting like the southbound end of the northbound donkey for a good while now, and apparently they're just going to keep doing that. It's going to backfire on them. It continues to backfire on them. It's only going to get worse. I think the American people are seeing more day by day that the Democrats have no interest in the American people. It's only in power that they seek for themselves. So hopefully it'll show up in the 2020 elections in a big way, because we really need to vote out certainly everyone who voted for the last spending bill, and I'm including Republicans in that, because that bill is absolutely atrocious.
Well, speaking of the House and Senate, I know criminal referrals are possible. Also, the possibility of investigating the investigators. Now, you're a former federal prosecutor. I'm assuming you agree with that. Why?
I do, because the only way to restore integrity to the Department of Justice and the FBI and the CIA and the State Department and anybody else that was involved in this is to root out all the bad actors, to expose them for exactly what they did, make the evidence of everything they did known to the American people so they can see it for themselves, the actual documents, so there's no misunderstanding as to what was said or done, and hold them accountable.
Finally, Sidney, I've got to ask you this, because a lot of people ask me about the rule of law, and if James Comey, Hillary Clinton, others will ever be called into account for their actions. They wonder if Comey will ever pay a price for lying to Congress, leaking government documents, if Hillary Clinton will be found guilty of lying, putting the nation's secrets at risk to foreign hackers, storing them on an unsecured personal server, destroying evidence, all those things. So what do you think? Are there two standards of justice in America, one for Hillary Clinton and her friends, another for Donald Trump and his friends?
I think the next year will tell us a lot in that regard. God bless Attorney General Bill Barr, because he's got his work cut out for him. He's the one who's going to have to restore the rule of law to this country. And what happens in the next year is going to tell us whether that's going to be done or not.
Well, I think a lot of people feel he's up to the task. So Sidney Powell, former federal prosecutor, author of the book, License to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Parents, the Superbook Bible app is a great way to get your child reading the Bible, because in today's busy world, we can use some help. The free Superbook Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible, playing great games, watching cool videos, discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available now.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I wills of God, the latest teaching from Pat Robertson.
Signed into law late last year, the First Step Act was the most significant bipartisan overhaul of the U.S. criminal justice system in decades. It reduced mandatory minimum sentences in certain cases and also helps nonviolent offenders move on with their lives outside of prison. Well, President Trump recently celebrated the new law at the White House. So far, 500 inmates have been released from federal prison because of this legislative change. But what now? Re-entering society has proven extremely difficult for most former inmates. Our next guest is Gilbert Gomez of Bakersfield, California. He says at the age of 9, he became involved with gangs and drugs. By the time he was 21, he faced a 30-year sentence in federal prison. But he turned his life around. Now he's helping others do the same. He's an ex-con. Gilbert, thanks for coming on to share your story.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you made some bad choices as a child and as a teenager. What made you in prison change your life around for eternity? Tell us about that.
You know, there was a 6-month trial in my case, and during that time I was shackled up in inside a prison cell. And I remember all the times that people would share with me the gospel, share with me about changing my life and how Jesus Christ had died for my sins. I didn't really quite understand that. But I do remember one of the persons in my life who was a principal one day and a friend. He told me that I would always be a dead man walking in a dead man's world. And I didn't understand that until I came to one day ask Christ to change my life, Jesus to change my life. And ever since that day, I've never been the same.
Gilbert, how was it then that you were able to find employment?
There was a general contractor by the name of Steve Sabaloni who took the chance on me. And he actually introduced me to the construction field. He gave me the opportunity to actually just work for him, and which was turned out to be a blessing to this day.
Well, I know, Gilbert, that there's still this stigma of being a felon. Many businesses and companies just refuse to hire felons. I know in this period of full employment right now, there are more construction jobs available than there are workers to fill them. So is that why they're showing more grace, because they need the workers? What's happening?
What happens is there's guys that are willing to give you an opportunity, and regardless of your background, what they want to see is that you're committed, that you show up to work every day, that you're loyal. Like I said, one of the things that my construction contractor told me, he said, Gilbert, I'd rather have somebody here that doesn't know anything but shows up to work every day, willing to learn, than to have somebody that's here and has all these skills, but yet calls in sick or steals from me. I'd rather have somebody that's loyal and shows up every day. And as they see those, they're willing to invest in your life.
And Gilbert, I know that you're really big on ex-cons finding employment like you did in the construction industry. Tell us about that.
Through one of the programs, we were able to go back and talk to the graduating candidates that were getting ready for release and share our stories or our testimonies to let them know that they don't have to, they can be productive citizens of society, that somebody's willing to take a chance on them. For me, it was my faith, of course, that I trusted in the Lord to provide for me and guide me. As we connected with these business owners, we basically build these bridges, and we're trustworthy. The scripture says that it's better to have a good name than to have riches. In Proverbs, it talks about that. And one of the things is having a good name amongst these people. They trust you. They trust you into their homes, into their facilities. I started working remodeling banks. So in a sense, I was doing legit bank jobs for this general contractor. And based on that, we're able to also help the guys that are in the group homes throughout the community, and then also introduce them to a workforce in a sense.
What do you really want former inmates, some of them released under the First Step Act, I guess 500 of them now, what do you want them to know, and others? I'm sure sometimes they get discouraged when they're looking for employment. What do you want to say to them?
You know what? Don't give up. You got to exhaust all possibilities regardless. You have to go to and give it a chance. The same way you've given 100% towards the gangs or drugs or whatever, turn it around, go 100%, exhaust all possibilities, because somebody's willing to give you a job. There's jobs out here in California, in the fields, in the grapes, wherever, picking up trash. It doesn't matter. They're willing to hire you, but you gotta give it 100%. You can't have one foot in the door and one foot out in the world or in whatever it is that you do.
And with you, that change began for eternity in faith in Jesus Christ. So
yes, it did.
We thank God for that, and we thank God for the work you're doing. Gilbert Gomez, thanks for joining us and setting us straight today.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
Folks, we've told you before about the Uyghur community. They're ethnic Muslims. Most reside in an area of western China known as Turkestan. They're among the most persecuted people on earth. Under the guise of combating Islamic terrorism, the communist Chinese government has removed more than 1 million Uyghurs from their homes. They've placed them into re-education camps. Here's what Sam Brownback, Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, said about that recently at a gathering of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Congressional Caucus on Capitol Hill.
had a new line from the Chinese today calling them boarding schools, that they were simply boarding schools that they were in. And I asked the representative at the UN when we had a bit of a discussion about this. I said, if they're boarding schools, I've got lists of names of Uyghurs that their family members cannot locate them. Would you please help me find them so we can find if they're dead or alive? I got no response.
A resolution in the U.S. House of Representatives, H.R. 649, says Uyghur Muslims in China are denied freedom of speech, religion, and movement. They're also denied due process. American Uyghur Rushan Abbas is founder and director of the Campaign for Uyghurs. She says Chinese government officials are forcibly gathering Uyghur DNA. Also, they're using facial recognition software and camera surveillance against them. Mrs. Abbas tells what happened last September after she spoke out against Uyghur detention during a speech at the Hudson Institute.
6 days later, my sister, Dr. Gulshan Abbas, and my aunt was abducted as the tactic by the Beijing to silence me, to stop my lawful activism in the United States. I have been a proud citizen of the United States for 25 years, yet the long arm of the Chinese Communist regime has extended its reach across the borders to ravage my heart by jailing the only close family I have.
So what should be done about this? Once again, here's Ambassador Sam Brownback.
Advocate, advocate, advocate. Push, push, push. And then also include these issues in your prayers. Put them up also in front of God.
Ahmadiyya Muslim Congressional Caucus co-chair Representative Peter King of New York praised Ahmadi Muslims for taking a stand for religious freedom. Although the Ahmadis themselves are a persecuted minority within the Muslim faith, they advocate for persecuted Christians and others like the Uyghurs in China and Rohingya in Burma.
Religious freedom should be universal. You can't have one religion free if the other is not free. All of us must be free, and none of us is free.
Christians, yes, we believe Jesus is the only way to salvation. But despite faith differences, we must show love to Muslims and people of other faiths. Part of demonstrating our faith is helping people when they suffer. Peter King said, religious freedom is for all of us. Yes, we know that Jesus came for all people, and he has commanded his followers to love one another. In John 13:34-35, he said, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Persecuted Uyghurs, Rohingya, Ahmadis, and others are watching. Do we really practice what Jesus preached? Well, that's it from the Global Lane this week. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Twitter. And until next time, be blessed.